Welcome to Tipsy Cheesemate, where we drink, you listen.
And we gossip.
This week's disclaimer is our experience isn't the same as everyone else's, so just take that into consideration when you're hearing this story. And also, from previous videos, just know again that these are just stories and they're not meant to attack or offend anyone. But if anyone has any issues, just let us know so we can
Talk it out.
Yeah.
And have a conversation. And yeah. These are just stories from our point of view, how we see things, how we view things, how we recall things. That doesn't mean it's the 100% truth or truth story, because there's, like I've been saying, there's always three sides to a story: her side, his side, and the truth.
So this week we're going to be talking about us being a first generation Mexican American living in a majority of American based city. Our sister wanted us to talk about our Chicano accent, which I didn't even know we had. A little background as to what a Chicano accent is. So the Chicano accent is mostly from the southwest region of the United States, and our family comes from Baja California, which makes sense as to why we would get that because they migrated to Arizona. So we were all born and raised there. Basically, it's kind of like so the accent is based on like the kind of rhythm that we speak.
English is stress time, while Spanish is syllable time.
We didn't crack our drinks open.
I was waiting for you.
What the heck?
Are
Hold
you going to
on.
present your
Hold
drink?
on. Oh, I guess. So I got a simply spiked strawberry lemonade.
Tall boy. And I have a Mr. Beast from our first episode. That was my elbow. Weak. That hurt my teeth.
That's good. The Chicano accent is in between being stress timed and syllable timed. Essentially, we turn the Z's into S's. Like instead of saying was, we'll say was. Do you say it?
Was. I feel like I say with a Z.
You do say with a Z, yeah. We fully pronounce the vowels. So instead of saying today, we'll say today. And then verbs that end in ing will kind of change the pronunciation of that too. Like instead of dancing, we'll say dancing. But now it's kind of spread to California dialect, so it's becoming more common.
And I feel like where we were in Arizona, because it was so close to California, I feel like, I mean, not everybody there was from California. There were a lot of people from California, though. And I didn't feel like we had like too big of an accent. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like in that specific place, I didn't feel outed for my Chicano accent per se. But once I moved to Phoenix, is when a lot of people started telling me a lot more, and I was like, really? Like that's
Which is weird because it's still
weird.
Arizona.
Yeah, but but the people there are not all from the same areas.
Yeah. So where we grew up, again, Arizona, and then like we said 2 videos ago that it was a small town and everything. So like everyone kind of knew each other and like essentially when we were going to school, most of the people there were Americans.
Mm-hmm.
There was like a few Mexican Americans and then maybe like one or two other races, but there was like only one kid that was that race.
I feel like of the minorities, Mexicans were the majority.
Yeah.
And even then, it was very extremely few.
Yes.
For me, like, yes, there was a lot of Hispanics in school growing up, but not that many, like, at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the friends that I did have were Mexican. It's like there were so few of us.
I will say, I think
Minority.
the Hispanics that we were there, I think most of us were Mexicans, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know actually 100%, but I do feel like most of them were Mexican, yes.
But basically, like growing up in that kind of environment, although we weren't extremely minoritized. I do feel that there was a lot of racism that occurred in the city. And me personally, like, I only recall of one occasion specifically, but like our sister has told me stuff too, and I'm like, what? I don't remember that. And I guess I was just blind to the fact, like, I never felt different than the people there.
I was thinking about that earlier. I was thinking about this specific topic. I knew some things were happening, but I didn't think of it necessarily as racism until I started growing up and being like, wait a second,
Mm-hmm.
and remembering like stories like that I tell. I'm like, that lady was racist. That's why this happened, or that's
Mm-hmm.
why that happened. And like for example, I know somebody who migrated to that city at a older age, and she swears that to this day she never ever received any form of racism. This lady doesn't speak English that well, and I really do feel like it's very naive on her side. Like she just, not in a bad way, she just doesn't notice, which is totally fine. That's totally fine. But I've seen firsthand this person receive racism, but she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't see it as that. Me and one of my Mexican friends, we were, I think it was a field trip, specifically this time that I'm telling about. It was, I'm pretty sure it was a field trip, or we were outside, I don't remember, but we were walking, and again, I'm very Spanglish, and I feel like she was too, and we started speaking in Spanish naturally because I feel like both of us spoke a lot of Spanish in general. That since we both spoke Spanish, we felt comfortable speaking in Spanish with each other, and through conversation, like se nos salía el español, and the teacher would get mad, and she would tell us like, "You guys need to stop speaking in Spanish." We're like, "Okay," and like she kept telling us, very mad. And at the third time, I think she gave us like detention and everything, and she told us that it is rude for us, which I do understand. But she was like, like it was just the reaction was very extreme, and
Mm-hmm.
telling us like that we needed to stop speaking English,
Spanish.
that we needed to stop speaking in Spanish and start speaking English only, that we weren't allowed to speak Spanish, which I can see at some point, like if we're around other people, it is rude to be speaking a different language that they don't understand. Yes, but it was just us two. We were talking with each other. We weren't talking with everybody else. There was no need for that.
Mm-hmm.
Her reaction was extreme, which as a kid, we were just like, oh, this teacher's so annoying because nobody liked that teacher.
Mm-hmm.
She also made me go to the nurse's office because I told her I have weak hands, which to this day, I do have weak hands. They hurt. And she made me go to the office, and then I hurt my foot one day. I'm not gonna go over that. I hated her. And then, like, years later, when I was talking about this specific thing with this friend, we were both talking about it, and I was like, dang, actually, thinking about it now, I think that this is where it stemmed from. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the hatred of Spanish speaking, which we see a lot in society. When somebody else speaks Spanish in public, it's like triggering. Where, again, I understand you don't have. It's rude to be talking in Spanish if the situation, like if the situation requires you to speak English, I can understand. But if I'm having a private conversation with somebody in Spanish, that should be fine. If it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't involve other people.
In elementary school, we always celebrated Cinco de Mayo. We would always perform or do something. Like we had a huge party and everything at
Mm-hmm.
school. But I do like remember so many kids just like their parents just didn't teach them to be respectful of the culture, just like making fun of it or being like, why are you dressed like that? And why does your hair look like that? And back then, again, it was kind of just like kids being kids.
Mm-hmm.
But now, like, you start to realize that the reason that those kids started asking all that is because their parents didn't teach them, like, to be respectful, to not be
Mock.
rude,
I
to
feel like
mock.
mocking, because like you said, I never mind. Like, do you mind when people dress up like Cinco de Mayo with like the
No.
hats and stuff like that? I personally don't mind to a point. I feel like once they start making fun of it, I'm like, mm. But like the Cinco de Mayo parties that we had, first of all, our mother and her friend organized everything and made it educational, and I feel like they really put in the cultural part, like our actual culture, into those parties. Yeah, the parties were before our mother started; they were already being organized. So we don't have too much information on how the parties were before. There was one year where they did have to cancel it apparently because parents and teachers were starting to complain about how the Mexican culture was being celebrated and focused on when there were a bunch of other cultures out there that are being discriminated against. Now, these people that were complaining were American.
And I do think that they should have celebrated other cultures, like if they had the resources and people to educate them. But again, like there wasn't a lot of people that were of different cultures apart from Mexican American. And so I think that
Hmm.
if we had more teachers that had knowledge on that, they would have celebrated it.
Yeah, of course. And like we said earlier, this city didn't have a lot of diverse minority background in it. So most of the people there were of Hispanic descent. Not necessarily always Mexican, but
Yeah.
for the most part, yes. And even for the Cinco de Mayo party that they had, it was for everybody. It wasn't like, oh, only Mexicans or like anything like that. Like you said, there were a lot of other people that would dress up,
Mhm.
and we would or not we, actually we would educate them on what Cinco de Mayo actually was
Mhm.
and the Alamo, like all of it. It wasn't just, oh, I'm proud to be a Mexican, like stuff like that. It was educational.
Mhm.
So if somebody from another culture wanted to do that, I'm sure there would have been no problem. And it would have been fun. Like
Yeah.
Pentecost at church, when
Mhm.
we would have a lot of different cultures
It's one of
show
my
their
favorite
food.
holidays.
Yes, I love that. Because of the food.
Of course. No, I like the dances the most.
Yeah. It was a celebration at church with a bunch of different cultures. Everybody from different cultures had their dishes, and some people would have their dances. I feel
Mhm.
like that's it. But you would go around to get the food from different places, and you would see like little information from each country.
I think we were still, or I was still in elementary school too, when the one instance that I do clearly remember was we had a neighbor that lived like across from us, and he was a firefighter, an American man. There was one night that we got home from a celebration of some sort at the church, and we were dressed up in our Mexican attire.
We had our folklorico clothing on, so the traditional Mexican dresses and everything. I'm pretty sure it was for Pentecost.
It might have been because it might have also been from us practicing, but we got home and this guy was drunk, extremely drunk, and he told my dad that he was speeding down the street. And honestly, like if he was, he could have just simply been like, "Hey, dude, like slow down," stuff like that, you know. But he walked all the way up to our driveway, and I mean, it was a pretty far walk because he wasn't just
Hmm.
across the street. He was across the street from and like in a whole other street on the corner. And we had a long driveway. At least from what I
Yes.
remember. It might have been not that long because we were kids, but and he got in my dad's no, he got in my mom's face
Hmm.
and was like, you fuck you beaners, and then he like spat on her, and I think he like threatened to hit her, but then my dad like pushed him away. And honestly, I'm surprised my dad didn't kick his ass.
It's because I feel like my dad,
Was scared at that point still.
yes.
Kind of living with caution at that point.
Hmm.
So he wasn't able to like actually physically defend himself. Um Now I don't really remember like what my parents responded in return, but I do remember that my dad was like, just go to your fucking house, like you're drunk. Um, they called the cops, and when the cops got there, the guy refused to answer his door. So there was nothing that they could do, like freedom of speech again. There's
Yeah.
nothing that could have been done there. The only reason why like he called the cops was because he was in our house and he spat on my mom. So again, that's also physical harassment. Which I think he got away with it as well because he was a firefighter. So there was nothing that they could do. and never saw or talked to him again?
I feel like for me personally, it hasn't been always so like big and intense. Like kids at school, I feel like would make comments, but again, it's kids being kids. That's how I saw it. Kids being kids, and slash or where do they get it from? Kids aren't born with that stuff. They usually hear stuff or see stuff from adults in their lives. And again, because I didn't like I said last what 2 episodes ago, I don't even know where we're at anymore. A lot of times I didn't even like notice they were bullying me per se. I felt like it was just them being kids. I didn't take it so personally. That's the thing. I didn't victimize myself in that
Mhm.
way. So when they would make comments, I would just be like, ugh, whatever. They're just being annoying. But like thinking about it, like it was a lot of racial slurs and like
Mhm.
nicknames that they would give. I'd be like, was that actually okay? I'm not gonna be butthurt about it forever because one, we were kids. Two, they probably grew up in a place where that was permitted and they saw that as a role model. So it is what it is. And I'm not I from what I see, the people that I still kind of have on my socials from my childhood, most of them don't give me that kind of vibe anymore. So I feel like it was mainly that we were all just kids.
I do remember because my best friend growing up, she was also a person of color, but she wasn't Hispanic or anything like that. And I remember there was one kid that was like, "Oh, you guys only talk to each other because you're both brown." And I'm like, "Why would you say
And
that?"
that's what I mean. Like comments like that, I somebody would have said that to me, I would have been like, you know,
Mhm.
I wouldn't have been like, oh, he's being racist.
Yeah.
But now, like thinking about it, like, I don't think that was
Mhm.
okay.
Obviously, there's like the typical of like the nasty faces that you get, kind of like looking at you up and down, like, yuck.
I did see a lot of that, and I feel like I chose to ignore it because I am a very self conscious person. So
Mhm.
I didn't know if they were looking at me because I'm brown, if they were looking at me because they didn't like my hair, they didn't like my shoes, they didn't like the way I dressed, or something like that, you know? So I didn't pay too much attention to it. But again, like, I've been in situations where we're talking in Spanish and you can tell. I feel like I just started opening my eyes a lot more. We didn't grow up in a place where my parents would be like, oh, this is being racist. This is
Mhm.
racist. This is. I feel like my parents were very, okay, this is happening. Let's protect our girls so they don't even see what's going on.
Mhm.
And let's just keep moving forward. Let's keep doing this. It's like avoiding that in a way to protect us. So I feel like, again, we didn't really realize what all that was.
Yeah, but something that really bothers me that I think really needs to change is like if you're having a ceremony or something and they're having to say your name, for them to ask you how to pronounce it and like make an effort because just recently I had a ceremony at school and I was really upset because it's something that like maybe isn't a bigger issue for some people, but for me it's like I worked so hard to get to this point just for you to say my name wrong. Like it doesn't that's not me. That's not my name. So it doesn't feel like I'm getting the correct recognition as other kids.
But I feel like even in general, and I've talked about this a lot recently, is you need to stand up for your name. Like you can there's so many names out there that are super hard to pronounce that all these people are pronouncing perfectly. So
Mhm.
just because they had a hard time maybe realizing the actual enunciation of your name does not give them an excuse to always butcher your name. Yes, a lot of times Leslie was pronounced correctly, but Castellanos wasn't. And I've always been like, it's okay, they don't know how to pronounce it because I understand that it's not so typical in a way. But now I'm always like, if they butcher it, I'm like, okay, no, that's not how you say it. It's this. Because that's your name. It's your identity in a way.
Yeah.
So when I hear you guys say Liz, it really like triggers me. I'm like, you shouldn't have to like
Yeah. So
shorten your name because of that.
both my husband and I, we both shorten our names at like restaurants and stuff just because it's kind of annoying, frustrating for like people to get it wrong. And it's not because I'm like, ugh, why are you saying my name wrong? But it's because sometimes you miss your orders because people don't know how to say it, which is fine. Like, but they could ask.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there were a lot of times where I would tell them my name and they'd get the order, or they would have the order, but I would never know that it was ready because I didn't know that they were trying to call my name. So I'll go by Liz and he'll go by Jay.
Which I understand, like especially like I don't know, fast food place, it gets busy
Mhm.
and it's like okay, something quick, but it doesn't. I don't know. I just feel like you shouldn't be having to modify your name. There's
Mhm.
a lot of Mexican Americans from older generations that even changed their name
Yeah.
completely because people couldn't pronounce it. To me,
Mhm.
that's crazy. And now, for example, Mateo, his name is Mateo. It's not Mateo. It's
Mhm.
not Matthew. It's Mateo. And I tell him all the time, your name isn't whatever they want to say. Your name is Mateo. If they want to pronounce it wrong, correct them. Say, my name is, and correct them because it kind of stings a little. To me, it
Mhm.
stings a little. It's kind of annoying. And Mateo is not a hard name to pronounce, and
Mhm.
people think it's funny when they mispronounce it. It's not funny to me. When people start laughing,
Mhm.
I feel like they're kind of mocking it.
At work and like at school and stuff, again, they'll be like, "Can I just call you Liz?" I'm like, "No. I don't
That's
like the name
that's
Liz."
not my name.
Yeah. So I'll try and tell them. But there's so many times that I've had to correct people like over and over and over again because they'll call me Lizeth. And I'm like, that's not how you say it. Like, it's Lizeth. And they're like, oh, Lizeth. I'm like, I just told you how to say it. And that's the English pronunciation of it. Like, I
Yeah.
don't even go by the Spanish pronunciation here. Like, whenever I go to Mexico, of course, I'll introduce myself as Lizeth. Um, but over here, it's Lizette.
And it takes practice sometimes because some names are harder than
Yeah,
others. I know. And then sometimes with accents, like
yeah.
people with other accents too, the enunciation sometimes gets a little weird because that's what it is. So I get it, but you need to practice.
Mhm.
I used to work somewhere where the person was of a Puerto Rican descent, so she had a different kind of enunciation to everything. And she was trying to pronounce one of our coworkers' name, and she was having a very, very hard time with it. It was I mean, it's not a hard name at all, but it's a very unique name that you don't hear often. So to her, it was the first time she's ever heard it, and she was struggling the hard time. She was struggling for a very long time on how to pronounce it, and she would say, like instead of saying her name, she would say, "Hey tú," or like "Niña." Ah, es
Mhm.
que no puedo decir tu nombre, and that would trigger me. I'm like,
Yeah.
and I would tell her, I'm like, this is how you pronounce her name.
Mhm.
Like, you need to, like, put in the effort. You can't just, like, oh, it's just too hard. That
Yeah.
isn't valid. You need, especially if that's your employee. Like, how are you not going to be able to call her by her name? You need to be able to say her full name. I need your help. Or you can't just be saying, hey, tú. I like know as moms,
Yeah.
a lot of times that happens. Mangano, mangano,
Mhm.
But it's a professional setting. You need to be able to giving it you need to be able to give that effort to
Yeah.
pronouncing it right.
People often mispronounce the last name, and it used to really, really, really bother me. Like in the beginning when they first hear it, I feel like it's a name that you can easily fix. Like people are just they got accustomed to it and everything. Um, but now currently, like I just got a new last name and it's a name from Guam, and so people like see it and they're just like, "What? Like why do you have that last name?" They're just confused and I'm like, "Do people not realize that people get married to different cultures sometimes?" And so I also think
Or adopted, like that's
yeah,
kind of rude.
yeah. And like I've heard a few people or a few people have texted me like, "Well, I'm still going to call you by your old last name because the new one's just too hard." And I'm like, no, this is my new last name, so that's what you're going to refer to me as.
I feel like myself, I butcher the last name, but I'm really trying. But
Yeah.
it's really to me, it's a very foreign last name, and I
Yes.
struggle with it.
I myself struggled with it in the beginning as well. Like, it was a name that I had never heard before in my life. And he helped me so many times, like, this is how you say it. I'm like, oh, okay. And I would actually be
So
at home.
since day one, he said, "This is gonna be your last name, baby girl."
Yeah, so it's definitely like a learning process, but it's the people that don't make the effort that really bothers us.
We get it; it's hard, but you're supposed to make a conscious. It's a human being, like Come on.
My sister-in-law and I were just talking about the fact that our baby names, like we have to be conscious of like how people are going to pronounce it, whether it be our family or whether it be separate people. So we're kind of like in between of like, should we do a name that's easy for other people or a name that's easy for our family to pronounce?
With Mateo, I didn't steal his name from you.
She did. She did. Let's get into this.
No, no, no,
So
no.
I watched Jane the Virgin before she did, okay? And ever since I heard the name, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's such a pretty name. Like I want that for my kid." Right? This was when I was 13 years old and this girl gets knocked up and she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to name him Mateo." I'm like, "Ah." She knew. She knew that I was naming him
I
that.
didn't know. One,
My sister can testify to that.
I did not know. To me, it's really important for my kid slash future kids to have that like
No.
to have that like identity of being of Mexican descent. I don't want my kid to have
Bob.
yeah because it it's not him, you
Yeah.
know. So I wanted something that identified him, and I wanted a name that our non-English speaking family members would be able to pronounce because we have family that has a hard time pronouncing stuff or names or whatever in English because they don't speak English. So I understand that, right?
But they do make the effort.
Yes, they do. And vice versa. I didn't want people that didn't speak Spanish to butcher
Hmm.
my kids' names
I know
either.
it's the perfect name, huh?
I was into a lot of different names, but Mateo was my favorite one,
So now I'm not going to tell her the rest of my baby names,
which
but
I don't care about because if I have any more kids, they're all going to be with M's now.
interesting. Interesting.
Interesting what?
I have an M1.
Well, that sucks for you.
But anyway,
We're going to see who gets knocked up first.
yeah, so that's something that I feel not just Mexicans, obviously, but a lot of people of color can struggle with. Me, for example, I'm combining cultures. So it's also trying to like make sure that our kid has his culture in his name as well. Wait, I don't I don't want to speak into existence of having a boy.
She's going to be a boy mom. I already told her the other day, you're
No.
going to have 4 boys. You give off the vibe of having a lot of kids, and they're all going to be boys.
I'm gonna have 2 kids. Going back to, the racism in our hometown and everything, I feel like once I visited at an older age is when I started to realize all the things. Um, Whether it was like certain comments that people made or like how differently I was treated. Not our hometown, but Leslie and I just recently we went to this event here in North Carolina on base, military base.
Oh my god.
Yes. And we got there. This was a free event, okay? We got there 3 hours before they opened the gates. I think it
Mm-hmm.
was 3 hours. And we sat in the blazing hot sun waiting for the gates to open. Again, we chose to be there. Like it wasn't we could
Against the
have
will.
yeah, we could have just easily waited until the gates opened, but plain white tees and Flo Rida was gonna perform, so I was like, we need to be there early because it's bands that we like or people that we like, and we want to be able to like have good seats and blah blah blah. Well, a lot of people were sitting behind us in the shade, even though they saw a line was already forming,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously those people got let in before us, which even then we were like,
Whatever.
whatever, like
It is
that's
what it
life,
is.
yeah. And we go in, there's not actual seats, so you had to bring in your own lawn chairs and everything, and we got sat behind a lot of those people that got let in even though they weren't forming in line for 3 hours, like they had just gotten there. And we saw that this guy was passing out backstage passes to
A
them.
soldier working for the event.
Yes. And he was giving them backstage passes. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know they had those. And I told Leslie, I was like, you should go ask him like how much they are.
And my social anxiety was like, no, I don't want to because I don't accept rejection well.
Yeah. And this guy, like, he seemed really nice.
And he was handing them out to everybody.
Yes.
Everybody.
And the people he was handing them out to were American people. And
Only American people.
yes. And the guy was himself was also American. And so Leslie goes up to him and
I went up to him and was like, hi, are you handing out backstage passes? And he was like, yeah. I was like, so how do I go about like buying them? And there was somebody behind me, another man, and he starts going up and starts talking basically over me, but I kept talking to the guy. I was like, yeah, so how can I go about like getting them? He's like, oh, we're not selling, buying it. He's like, we're not selling them. I was like, so how can I get it? And he like kind of shrugged me off, and the guy asked for it. The guy's like, oh, you guys have backstage passes? Yeah, here. And he gives him some. He gives him some right in front of me. I was like, oh, so can I have some? And he went, we don't have any right now. I went, oh, okay. Again, I don't accept projection well, so I felt really awkward at that point. I was like, I don't know what to say or what to do because maybe he did run out. But I didn't like the fact that he gave it to somebody else right in front of my face when was clearly asking. So I was like, whatever. And I went up to Lizette and I told her that basically. I was like, well, he said no, but he said they were out, so I guess we can ask him later.
you had just gone up to me and you told me that. But still, I was like, maybe she just asked him wrong because he kind of just
Porque soy
dismissed you.
pendeja.
Yes. He just kind of dismissed her. And I was like, that's weird. Like, people don't usually do that here. I was like, so I'm going to go walk up to him and ask him myself. So I go up to him and he just like looks away. And I'm like, hi, I'm so sorry to bother you. Like, I was just wondering how I can get the backstage passes. And he goes, well, we're not selling them. I said, okay, so you're giving them away? He said, yeah. And I said, all right, so what can I do to get them? And he was like, well, we don't have any right now. And I saw them in his pocket. So I was like, okay, so when when you have more available, like, will you come up to us to get us some? Because we've been here all afternoon. And I said, we're sitting up in the front, so it's easy to like see us and everything. And he was just like, no, we don't have any. And just dismissed me too. And I was like, okay. And at that point, still, it was kind of like, again, maybe he really just like can't give it to us. I don't know. But we
Mm-hmm.
sat back down and we're just like enjoying life and talking and blah, blah. And then he comes up again and passes it out to more American people and the people that had already had some.
Mm-hmm.
And he just gave them extras for like them to pass around in their little group.
Not just that, but like, so he was giving them per artist. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like backstage for the first group of girls, and it was Playing White Tees and Florida. So he had different sets. So to these people, he wasn't just giving them like one artist. He would repeat and give them the different artists as
Yeah.
well.
And a lot of them were just like, oh, I don't know them, but that's cool.
And we
Which,
knew them, and we
yeah,
wanted to like everything. It
it
was
really bothered me. Yeah, so just experiences like that where it's something super mild that, like, did we get hurt? No. But he could have been nicer. Like, why was he
Mhm.
being so nice to everyone else, but as soon as we walked up to him, he completely dismissed
Yeah,
us?
because he wouldn't even look me in the face.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you said. Like he was just like completely like dismissing me 100%. And again, I didn't know if it was he was busy, he was like whatever. And I don't like one. And this isn't every like place that I go to. I don't like to make the person or worker feel like I'm causing them any kind of trouble.
But he wasn't busy.
So,
He was literally just standing there.
but I'm not gonna go and fight because to me at that point it wasn't worth it.
Hmm.
There are times where I feel like it is worth it, and I feel like I do speak up when I need to. But at that point, it was very hot that day. I just wanted to sit down and enjoy the freaking show. I didn't want to risk getting kicked out. I didn't want to
Yeah.
risk like any of that. So I just wanted
We
to,
didn't cause commotion. We just sat there and accepted it.
yeah, enjoy the shows.
Okay, so speaking to us in Spanish, but in a derogatory way, being like,
Yes.
"Oh, hola." Why? Why do that? And I also
Yes.
think it's really weird that a lot of people like it's very common for them to make certain Spanish comments.
And that's what I mean. Like there are people that like I just thought they were being funny and cute and everything.
Mhm.
But thinking about it now, I'm like, wait a second, like the people that were doing like that kind of comment, like
It's a little weird.
it was very weird and very sus. There's no reason like we obviously speak Spanish. We obviously speak English. So like and those people knew we would speak English. Like it wasn't
Mhm.
like oh, pobrecita, solamente habla español. Let me try to be nice and like accommodate to her and speak to her in Spanish.
No.
Because we would respond in English and they
Mhm.
would still be very insistent on ¿Cómo estás? Like that come on guys, like do better.
Did you ever have any issues like oh, I think you did with relationships? Like cuz we both dated different cultures.
So I did have a relationship with somebody that was of American descent and it wasn't with him. I feel like he was a very nice guy
Yeah.
and he was very understanding and he would try like genuinely try to learn and try to accept like all these things,
Mhm.
even try foods that I know he wasn't comfortable with,
Yeah.
but his mother apparently didn't like that very much. And he to me it's very important again for my children to be to identify as their culture, to learn their roots, embrace their roots and be proud of their roots. So I've always said the way I was raised is speaking Spanish only until I went to school, and at home it's only Spanish. So I've always said I want that for my kids. And I remember once jokingly making a comment that one, when we had kids, they were gonna be speaking Spanish because obviously they're gonna be speaking Spanish, and two, that my mother was gonna raise them until they were like 12 or 15, then I'll take care of them because I like the way my mother raised us when we were younger for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, I'm going to mother my own children when and if I had kids. We were in high school, like very young into high school.
It was just a stupid comment.
It was a stupid joking around comment that this person's mother took such high offense to, and one of the reasons why he had to break up with me.
She got broken up with by the mother-in-law. I myself also cuz I moved away from Arizona from that hometown already. Well, I guess kind of younger cuz I was 13 when I left. Um and so I didn't really have the whole relationship thing in the hometown specifically. It started like once I had moved to Texas. And still there, I dated an American man because I think I was just kind of used to seeing American men that like American men. um, so it was just like my type. And I started dating an American man. And whenever I went to his parents' house, they were just flabbergasted, like not expecting a brown girl to walk through the door. I remember that when I first met them, they were kind of just like iffy about me. Like they didn't like me because of my color, and I know this because the guy told me. So yeah, it was kind of weird, like for the first time experiencing that of dating outside of my culture, and I've never dated in my culture. Never.
I feel like it also has to do with your demographics.
Yeah, so when I first started dating people, it was in Texas. It was very diverse. There was a ton of culture everywhere. And so that's when I kind of started like experiencing after that guy. I was like, maybe American men aren't for me. Like, why would I stick with an American man whose family doesn't like me when there's so many other options here?
And that's not saying everybody's the same,
Yeah, no.
because I have talked to other American men whose parents were okay with
Yeah.
me being
My
Mexican.
next boyfriend was half Asian, half white, and his dad was white, and I mean he loved me.
Hmm. I feel like for myself also where we grew up, my demographic was very limited. The dating pool was very limited, and no matter what, you couldn't avoid dating your friend's ex-boyfriend because there was only so many guys. It's such a small city, and the very few guys that I feel like I could pull in a sense were a certain demographic, or I was too shy to approach the ones that I actually like stuff like that, you know. So I feel like my demographic in that area was very limited. Once I went to Phoenix, I feel like I had a lot more options and I did explore a little bit, but then I got married.
And now to end on a positive note, that although we grew up in a very like non-diverse small town, I feel that regardless of, we were still able to celebrate our culture as much as we could.
Hmm.
And now we live in more of a diverse community, so we feel more proud of our culture and um,
I feel like we're able to embrace it more
yeah.
without feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to hide the fact that whatever, you know? Bye.
Bye.